Why don't we start with
a vibes check? What were you up to on Friday?
What was I up to on Friday? Oh, God, is this a quiz?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a quiz. Now it is. Now it's like I
was in clinic.
A wellness check.
Do I recollect what I was doing 3 days ago?
Yeah. What was the Fifth Circuit up to on Friday?
Oh, shenanigans.
Yeah. Shenanigans from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. I was traveling, and when I landed, I saw that the Fifth Circuit had a new decision about the regulation of Mifepristone. And I feel like we're pretty up on abortion policy, abortion law, abortion regulation, on the Mifepristone cases. You feel like that?
I feel like we have our finger on the pulse.
Yeah. How'd you feel about what was going on? I mean, not emotionally, but did you feel like you understood it?
Not immediately, and I was annoyed because, like, how many of these decisions happen on a freaking Friday afternoon? You know, I'd had a great day. I was in clinic with a great resident. We had, we did some amazing work together. And here, I am at dinner, just trying to enjoy my fish tacos.
So we figured if we're in that situation, then many of our listeners might be as well.
So we put out the bat signal. And we got some amazing people on the show at very short notice. And we're going to talk today to a legal expert, David Cohen, who's a professor at Drexel. He's sort of the creator of shield law theory, and so he definitely has his finger on the pulse, so he's going to tell us what he knows.
We're also going to talk with Dr. Ushma Upahdyay, who is an abortion researcher at Answer at the University of California, San Francisco, who is an expert on all of the data, in particular the latest data, both on the safety of Mifepristone and the safety of Mifepristone via telehealth, which is at issue in this case.
We'll also talk to Dr. Robin Wallace, who is a family physician and has cared for patients who are self-managing their abortion and can really speak to what patients are experiencing and the safety of care.
We're very happy to welcome back David Cohen. David is a law professor at Drexel University and one of the leading national experts on abortion, as well as one of the creators of the shield law theory. He also is the co-author of After Dobbs, How the Supreme Court Ended Roe, But Not Abortion, and Obstacle Course, The Everyday Struggle to Get an Abortion in America. Welcome back to Outlawed.
Happy to talk about things today.
Yeah. Can we start with a brief history of the cases challenging the approval of Mifepristone? I know that there's been 2 cases that the Fifth Circuit has touched, but it's been confusing for me even to keep track of what's going on in those, or what's gone on in those 2 cases.
Yeah, so in 2022, soon after Dobbs, the first case was filed. And that was a challenge not just to the recent changes with Mifepristone's availability, but also to its 2000 approval. And that case was interesting because it was heralded by the anti-abortion movement as like the big post-Dobbs push to not only allow states to ban abortion, which obviously happened after Dobbs, but this is going to get rid of medication abortion. And it failed because in 2024, the Supreme Court said that these doctors, a bunch of anti-abortion doctors, didn't have what's called standing to bring the case, meaning they weren't the right people to challenge it because they hadn't been personally injured by the approval of Mifepristone or the relaxation of its availability. So the thing is that case didn't go away entirely, and it sort of morphed into 3 other cases brought by no longer doctors, but by 3 different groups of anti-abortion states. And so the case that's been in the news this week has been one of those cases brought by Louisiana against the FDA. The Louisiana case, importantly, is not going back to 2000 and challenging the initial approval of Mifepristone. It is just challenging the REMS change, the federal requirements by the FDA that allowed for mailing Mifepristone.
Sometimes I feel like, that old video, How a Bill Becomes a Law. On this show, we what we really need is that like song about how a case moves through the courts. So that's
right. Yeah, no. And it's complicated because there's federal courts, there's state courts,
right.
There's rushed cases, there's cases that take years. It's complicated.
Well, that can be your next project after.
Yeah.
So going back to the Louisiana case, so what happened in the trial court with the Louisiana case?
The Louisiana case, in February, there was a hearing. And the judge in that hearing, who's a conservative Trump appointee, expressed some concern for ruling while the FDA is supposedly undergoing its own review of mifepristone's safety and efficacy. RFK and Macquarie, the head of the FDA and Department of Health and Human Services, they've said we're doing a review of mifepristone. And the judge said, well, if you're doing this review, then maybe I should just wait. And he said that in the hearing, and then he ultimately issued a ruling a few weeks later saying that same thing. He said, I think Louisiana has a point here in the merits of the case, but I don't think I should rule while the government is reviewing mifepristone's safety. You have to come back to me in 6 or 7 months telling me what's going on, but I'm going to put this on hold. This is preposterous. Mifepristone has been studied endlessly, and the FDA has done these studies, has received the studies from experts in the field. It is safe. It is effective. We know that. So we know this is a politically motivated review if it is happening. But the judge said, if you're doing this, I'm going to wait.
So then how does it get to the Fifth Circuit?
Louisiana wasn't happy with that. Louisiana wanted a ruling right away. So Louisiana filed an appeal to the Fifth Circuit. And rather than wait for the normal appeals process, what they did was ask for the Fifth Circuit to stay the lower court opinion, basically to overrule the lower court while the case is being appealed. You have to really show extreme circumstances to get the appeals court to put the lower court decision on hold while the appeal process goes on. And, this is the conservative Fifth Circuit, and the case gets assigned randomly to 3 judges on that court. There's a lot of judges, and it was assigned to some of the most conservative judges on the court. And they agreed with Louisiana. On Friday afternoon, they issued an opinion saying that while this case is on appeal, we are staying the lower court decision, which means we are agreeing with Louisiana and we are putting the FDA's relaxation of mifepristone on hold while this case is being appealed. The Fifth Circuit said very clearly that this ruling from last Friday applies nationwide.
So that brings us conveniently back to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court acted a couple days later on this May 1st order by the Fifth Circuit. And so tell us what those actions meant, and then what do they indicate, do you think, for the future?
So every circuit court has an individual justice on the Supreme Court who's responsible for overseeing emergency applications from that court. So the Fifth Circuit, which covers Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, the justice who's responsible for the Fifth Circuit is Sam Alito, the author of Dobbs. And on Friday night, after the decision from the Fifth Circuit, Danco, one of the drug manufacturers of mifepristone, the brand version Mifeprex, Danco said to the Fifth Circuit, please put your decision on hold. And if you don't do that by 9 o'clock tonight, then we will go to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court to put this on hold. The Fifth Circuit did nothing. So early Saturday morning, Danco went to the Supreme Court, meaning they went to Justice Alito, and they asked Justice Alito to basically put the decision on hold while we have time to ask the full Supreme Court to issue a stay. It's called the request was for an administrative stay. So basically, let us have a week or so to file our papers to appeal this decision. But while we're doing that, please put the lower court decision on hold. The request was made Saturday morning. Justice Alito took about 48 hours to sit on that, which is probably a little longer than often, I think, probably because he's, the author of Dobbs, so he's not in a hurry to correct the Fifth Circuit. But by Monday morning, he issued a 1-page order saying, yes, I will put this on hold until Monday, so Monday, May 11th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. There is now a hold on the Fifth Circuit decision. And in the meantime, in this week, basically, he gave it a week, all of the parties in the case are going to be filing briefs, asking the court, Danco and GenBioPro, maybe the FDA are going to ask the court to put the Fifth Circuit decision on hold. Louisiana will file a brief saying don't put it on hold. And then the Supreme Court, in theory, will decide by 5 o'clock on Monday.
And what do you think they'll decide?
I mean,
you had to use your crystal ball.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty optimistic that they will put it on hold. We had a similar posture of the case from 2022 when it got to the Supreme Court initially, which was in 2023. The Supreme Court did put this on hold. They ultimately then found that the plaintiffs didn't have standing to challenge this. Now, we have different plaintiffs in this case, but it's a very similar case, and there's a very similar concern that Louisiana is not harmed by mifepristone. So I think given the data point of a very similar case, procedurally, the court put it on hold and then ultimately ruled against the lawsuit. I think they'll do that again, but certainly there's no guarantee.
So you're often credited as being one of the architects or the architect of SHIELD laws, which have enabled states with abortion access to provide telehealth abortion care to people from restrictive states across the country. So looking down the road, why couldn't states with SHIELD laws just say, all right, well, prescribe off-label. You have this drug, you can still use it off-label and mail it.
Yes, that's a really good question. So there's a difference between off-label use and REMS. So the REMS are requirements that the FDA puts on the drug manufacturers saying that this is how your drug has to be dispensed. There is no such thing as off-REMS or off-label getting around those requirements. The label is different. The label is the amount to be dispensed, the frequency with which to dispense it, and the medical indications for dispensing it. Those people can get around. Those people can, doctors, other prescribers can prescribe off-label, but that is different than the REMS. The REMS are requirements that cannot be avoided without the drug manufacturer facing a penalty. And so Danco and GemBioPro, two of the three manufacturers of Mifepristone, they are responsible for making sure that all of the people who they provide their drug to follow the REMS. And if they don't do that, they could be seriously fined and sanctioned or even no longer have the approval of their drug.
So because you wouldn't be meeting the in-person dispensing requirement, you wouldn't be allowed to do that and sort of skirt the REMS.
Correct. But if you are following the REMS, so mifepristone is approved for abortion, but it's also used in miscarriage management. If you are following the REMS, you can still use it off-label for miscarriage management, even though it's approved for abortion.
Okay.
Misoprostol, the second drug in the two-drug regimen for medication abortion frequently used in the United States, misoprostol is approved for ulcer treatment, but it's used off-label for all sorts of obstetric purposes, including in an abortion. And that is not changed by this ruling. I think the important thing is that this is not over, and whatever the Supreme Court does, this is not over. The anti-abortion movement is coming after pills because they know that they are growing in usage, they are effective, they're hard to stop. I mean, it's just hard to stop abortion pills, just like it's hard to stop any drug from crossing state lines. And so the anti-abortion movement is laser focused on it, and they will not stop no matter what the outcome of this case, no matter what the outcome in the FDA with their review. They are going to keep coming after them. So this is a battle that I think we're never going to see the end of. And that's because of how effective abortion pills are and how resilient patients and providers are in getting care and providing care. So, this is just another step in this endless battle.
So we just heard from David Cohen about how the Fifth Circuit, again, upended access to mifepristone on May 1st earlier this month and ordered that mifepristone could no longer be prescribed via telehealth. The Supreme Court ordered a temporary stay until May 11th, but access to mifepristone remains significantly threatened. And at issue are complaints by plaintiffs that mifepristone is unsafe, and particularly that there is insufficient data to demonstrate that it is safe when prescribed via telehealth.
Today, we've asked Dr. Ushma Upahdyay, a professor at the University of California, San Francisco, and an expert on mifepristone safety and the safety of telehealth, to come help us review the evidence. Dr. Upahdyay is an epidemiologist and demographer at Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health, and one of the leading experts on the safety, efficacy, and epidemiology of medication abortion. welcome to Outlawed. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I think you're the best person to talk to us about the safety of medication abortion. And so, is medication abortion safe when prescribed via telehealth?
Medication abortion absolutely is safe and effective when prescribed through telehealth.
We know as providers who provided care through the pandemic that telehealth was a game changer for people. And for people who have very busy lives, telehealth can make a huge difference.
That's right. In our research, we found that people who are have faced structural barriers to care, people who are low income, adolescents, and people who live in rural areas were significantly more likely to say that telehealth made a difference in accessing timely abortion care.
And can you talk a little bit about what the studies showed about safety of telehealth abortion?
Yes, absolutely. So in the CHAT study, it's called the California Home Abortion by Telehealth Study. It included patients from 24 states. We were going to start in California, but we expanded as the providers we were working with expanded to more states. So we were able to follow over 6,000 patients. We received their electronic medical records, and we also, for a subsample of about 1,000 of them, they also completed surveys about any follow-up care they received. And so among that, the cohort of 6,000 patients, we found a safety rate that is equivalent to the safety rate as printed on the FDA label and as found in many other previous studies. It was about 0.25% experienced a serious adverse event after the abortion. And then effectiveness was equivalent. About 2% of patients needed an additional intervention, either more medications or a procedure to complete the abortion.
The other thing that people frequently see cited by anti-abortion groups who are challenging safety of mifepristone are a number of studies, and in particular, studies that are not high-quality data. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the evidence that is used to argue against the safety of telehealth abortion and what the problem is with that evidence.
Yeah, there are a handful of reports. Some of them are studies. I like to call them reports because some of them are not peer-reviewed. They were just published on a website. One in particular, we call it the EPPC report. These analyses are conducted by staunchly anti-abortion advocates. Their methodology is, I would say, deceptive in many ways. But what they do is they report out rates of serious adverse events, but they include just everything they can into this rate of serious adverse events. Whereas there's a very specific definition that we use in epidemiology to mark a serious adverse event. Most standard is any abortion that is followed by blood transfusion, by major surgery, abdominal surgery, and then is followed by hospitalization, so hospital admission. And that one is kind of a catch-all for the most serious adverse events that requires a hospital stay and multiple treatments. And so we're really getting a nice picture of those that rise to the level of seriousness. Whereas these anti-abortion analyses, most egregious to me is that they include any emergency department visit after an abortion. And we know there are many reasons that people go to emergency rooms. And the rate is about 4 to 7% of patients will go to an emergency room during abortion. And we have a separate analysis that finds that the further away that someone lives from their abortion provider, the more likely they will visit an emergency room for follow-up care or for any kind of clinical advice. And I think it's kind of common sense that it's just very difficult to travel hundreds of miles back to where they got their abortion pills and when they can go to a provider nearby.
It also seems like one of the things that's happening is that in those communities where patients may go to the emergency room, they're going to the emergency room for primary care anyway. And when you have abortion care cut off, like your primary care provider is no longer able to provide that, then your primary care provider might be the emergency room.
That's right. So many people don't have an OB-GYN or someone they can go to for this care. And so this is the only place many people know to get care, and that will be covered by insurance too, right? That's another major issue, is often they don't have a primary care provider because they don't have health insurance, whereas they know that if they go to an ED, it very likely will be covered. So we have 2 studies on this topic. One where we had used a national data set. It's called the NEDS, the National Emergency Department Sample. So it is representative of all emergency department visits in the U.S. We found that a full 50% of those emergency department visits received no treatment. So it was for observation care only. Another study we did in California only using Medi-Cal claims, California-based Medicaid, we found that 67% of abortion-related visits received no treatments. So we know that a lot of people are going to emergency rooms after an abortion. It's 4 to 7%, but they're going for reasons other than for treatment for a complication, a serious adverse event.
Many folks who are living in communities without a provider, you're exactly right. They just want that confirmation that things are okay. And even if telehealth abortion is like their only option because of state bans or other restrictions, they may still want a provider to be part of their care journey. And so it's flawed to think that they're going to the ER because of a problem. They're going to the ER because they want care.
I am very passionate about access to telehealth abortion, but people also need to have access to care within their own communities. People should have the right to be able to see someone in person if that is their preference, and someone who is trusted and someone who, they trust them not to call the police or criminalize them for their reproductive behavior.
You also lead the We Count study, which is an effort that we both love to count abortions since just prior to Dobbs. There's been some interesting recent data about how telehealth contributes to overall abortion numbers now, and I wondered if you could talk about that.
Telehealth abortion now accounts for about almost 30,000 abortions every month in this country. It's a lot. And then about a little more than half are abortions provided under shield laws into states with abortion bans or bans on telehealth or 6-week bans. And then 45% are provided within states where telehealth abortion is legal and legally protected.
What do you think will happen if the Supreme Court agrees with the Fifth Circuit's ruling about removing protections for Mifepristone for telehealth care?
I think the impact will be devastating. If they do make that decision, it will be based on politics, not science, not medical evidence. It will impact care and access in all 50 states. It's not just relegated to those southern states or other states. It's really going to affect people everywhere in this country. Even though today, as we sit and speak, telehealth abortion is legally accessible, with the churning, the switching of the laws, it causes a lot of confusion, and a lot of people are just going to avoid it or simply feel like it's not available right now. And that's what they want, the confusion. I think that's what they're aiming for, is to create this confusion and to create misconceptions about the safety and availability of telehealth.
Now we turn to Dr. Robin Wallace, a family physician and experienced abortion provider, to talk to us about the patient experience with telehealth abortion. And we wanted to talk to Robin because, in addition to her work in clinical care, she volunteered for the M&A hotline, or the Miscarriage and Abortion Hotline, where she counseled many patients experiencing miscarriage and abortion after getting medications via telehealth. Welcome to Outlawed.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
So, one of the things that's really frustrating to me about this whole case, we've both prescribed Mifepristone a ton. We know that Mifepristone and misoprostol, they're like peanut butter and jelly. They work so well together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And generally, patients have fewer side effects when they use Mifepristone and misoprostol rather than a misoprostol alone regimen. And so like this whole idea of just taking out one of the medications arbitrarily is frustrating. So we'll acknowledge our shared clinical frustration.
Absolutely. Yes.
And when I think about safety from like a physician perspective, I think about all the medications that patients can get over the counter, like Tylenol and ibuprofen and Benadryl, that can really, if they take them nefariously, can cause a lot of harmful side effects. Whereas Mifepristone, that doesn't really happen.
It's so safe. It is. When we hear about complications or the bad things happening, which are so rare, it's not because of the medicine. It's because someone was pregnant.
Right.
And like pregnancy itself brings this huge risk to a person's life.
Tell us a little bit about why someone might pick a telehealth abortion.
There are so many reasons that folks are choosing or needing to have their medication abortion at home and to get the pills by mail. We are in this situation now where there's half of the country, folks don't have the option to go and get in-person care. And so their best and safest choice is to get those medications that have been proven over and over again to be safe and request them by mail through telehealth and then manage their abortion at home. When I see more bans go into effect, I think about the people who really need that care, know they need that care right away as soon as they find out that they're pregnant. There's so many different people that we talk to that as soon as they find out they're pregnant, they know they can't do it again, right? It could be someone who's in school or someone who just started a new job or someone who doesn't have the finances to support a child or another child in their family, and they're really concerned about caring for the family they have. I always think about that patient who maybe wanted more children, but their last pregnancy was so traumatic. You know, we hear, and there's more and more stories about folks who have these near-death experiences in childbirth. And so imagining another pregnancy and potentially having to go through that again is just terrifying. And it like breaks my heart to think about people who don't find a way to get the management that they want, to get the abortion that they want. So those are the folks I think are some of the people that are looking for telehealth, looking for pills. They may have this small child at home that they're taking care of or multiple kids. They may be balancing jobs and they don't have time to travel out of state to get that abortion that they want and need.
Yeah, and so I can imagine someone who's experienced this trauma of a traumatic birth, having a baby in the NICU, even if your birth isn't traumatic, that's also trauma.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then you're finding out you're pregnant, living in a state where maybe your only option is telehealth, and now you're self-managing that at home and potentially facing an experience that may kind of reignite all of that trauma.
You know, a lot of people don't know what they're getting into necessarily if they haven't experienced a miscarriage or a medication abortion before. And I think, you know, sometimes I think about our American culture and like take a pill, like quick fix, like solves the problem. And I wonder how much that people have that mindset when they go like, oh, I'll just get pills and end my pregnancy and that'll be it. And some people have very straightforward experiences and they have bleeding like a period, the pregnancy passes and everything is fine. But for other people, like those cramps can be really intense and very painful. The amount of bleeding might be surprising. And the misoprostol is super safe, but can have some like side effects that aren't fun, right? Like you can feel like you have the flu for a couple of hours, body aches, chills, fever,
diarrhea,
nausea, upset stomach stuff, like all of that. Sometimes people have folks with them. Other times they're doing it by themselves while their kids are in bed. So they're doing it overnight. And so going through all of that can be overwhelming and you feel crummy and you don't know if it's normal or not. And so those are the people that would call into the hotline.
Yeah. And when we talk to Ushma about like who seeks follow-up care, maybe in their own community, like who might end up in the emergency room, a lot of those folks don't need treatment, but are seeking just confirmation that it worked or reassurance. And it sounds like a lot of people calling in are just like, is this normal? Is it not normal?
Yeah. I think, you know, the M&A hotline was founded by a group of primary care docs back in 2019, even before Dobbs. But because they recognized that there were so many people out there that just needed that reassurance. They didn't need to go to the emergency room. We have this whole other healthcare crisis happening in the country about access to general care and primary care and emergency care. So what was the way that they could kind of act as that safety net that primary care physicians are so used to providing, and doing it over the phone and doing it anonymously? And it wasn't never intended to provide direct medical advice, right? Like that's not what the hotline does. But they provide medical information. And so they now have over 100 volunteers.
That's incredible.
That are answering calls from all over the country to help people before, during, and after their abortion and miscarriage experiences. It feels great to be able to like talk to that person on the other end and be like, yeah, this is okay. It's gonna pass. And if it doesn't, I want you to call me back and we're gonna talk about it again. And so that's what we spent a lot of time doing on the hotline.
Yeah. And I can imagine that people might be fearful of going to the emergency room if they're fearful of criminalization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more headlines we see of folks who are being arrested and indicted for their miscarriages is frightening, right? And we know that happens systematically and happens more often to Black and brown people in this country. And so I can only imagine how scary it might feel to be going through a miscarriage, having bleeding and cramping, being in pain, passing your pregnancy, and then being scared to go and seek help from the people that are supposed to be our care providers.
And just to be clear, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. The same medications that we use for miscarriage management are the same that we use for medication abortion. And if telehealth with Mifepristone is cut off for abortion, it will also be cut off for miscarriage care too. And so it has a lot of domino effects on other types of reproductive health care, which is frustrating.
Yes, indeed.
So thinking back to your time on the hotline, can you think about sort of a scenario or a common scenario that people might call in with that sort of stuck with you?
The scenarios that I would often spend the most time on were the people who were having more bleeding than expected and really trying to sort out, do I need more care or not? And we spent a lot of time sort of educating and providing that information, okay, this is going to be normal. When you if it keeps going, if it gets heavier, if you're getting dizzy, these other warning signs of maybe it's too much, that may be a reason to seek care. And then it is a lot of, things that we learn by taking care of patients over the years of really meeting the person where they are and seeing where their level of worry or concern is, helping them assess, what are my resources at home? Who's here to take care of me or who's not? How quickly can I get somewhere to seek in-person care if I need it? And some folks would choose on their own, okay, now's the time. I'm going to go in. And, me on the other side, I'd be like, oh, I don't know if you really have to right now, right? But it was clear that's what that person needed at that moment. But then also sitting with those folks who felt scared to go in or knew they wouldn't be able to afford it if they went in, had no one to take care of their kids so that they could go in, those kinds of folks, and being able to sit and talk with them, provide reassurance when it was appropriate, and then sort of say, you know what, this might be the time. But that's rare. It's so rare to actually require in-person care, which I know Ushma talked to you guys about.
One clear message we want to get across is that Mifepristone and misoprostol are safe. They're safe when managed through in-person care, through telehealth, and all these legal shenanigans are annoying.
This lawsuit is going through. This court decided this. Now there's an appeal. And so we're going to flip back. That flip-flop and that chaos, it's the chaos by design. But that chaos is so harmful for our entire community. It's stressful for us as providers. And I can't even imagine how it feels as a patient or as someone seeking abortion during this time and trying to figure out, what am I going to do?
Yeah, a lot of unfortunate consequences. So this is just a quick note about where telehealth stands today with the Supreme Court stay on the Fifth Circuit case. So just to be clear, telehealth abortion with Mifepristone and misoprostol is currently legal. If the order goes back into effect, telehealth abortion via mail with misoprostol-only regimens will remain legal. And personally, I find this very frustrating because patients experience more side effects with misoprostol-only regimens compared to those with mifepristone. But bottom line, no matter what the Supreme Court says about this case, telehealth abortion will continue to be available no matter what. The attacks on mifepristone won't stop, but scientists, doctors, and experts who provide abortion care can continue to share their knowledge, can continue to advocate for patients about the safety and efficacy. We want this to remain an option for as many people who need it in our country. And right now, telehealth abortion is the only option for many people. Opinions expressed on this podcast are our own. Philanthropy keeps this podcast ad-free. To donate, you can find a link in the show notes. This podcast is executive produced by us, Dr. Bev Gray, Dr. Jonas Swartz, and Stevie Manning. Thanks to Nick Thorburn, Patrick Ford, and Maker for our score. And extra special thanks to all of those scientists and friends who responded to the bat signal to explain what in the heck is going on with the Fifth Circuit.